It's a journey that I propose. I am not the guide nor technical assistant. I will be your fellow passenger. My junior year of high school is when I really realized that I wanted to do film production and media production, mostly on the lack of representation in film and what is usually found, or the stereotypes that are in film. And I was like, there has to be a middle space where I could be able to, or people like me could view themselves on the screen without feeling like that's not who we are as a group, as a community. So yeah.
So I've always been someone that's really interested in storytelling all of my life. I love to write short stories and show my dad.
I think what brought me to media was really student journalism. So I don't think I had a plan to be a journalist. I just knew when I was younger that I loved to write, I loved stories. I didn't know how I would make a living as a writer. And I would get a lot of grief from my Chinese immigrant family about why don't you just, if you don't like science, why don't you just be a lawyer and then you'll make a good living. But I knew that wasn't really what I wanted to do.
Though the rail has been ridden, winter clouds cover, autumn's exuberant quilt, we must provide our own guideposts.
In school, including in white predominant universities, we're tokens, but it's a school, and sometimes we have to face these realities of finances, affordability, distance, because we're so sometimes we rely on our community to uplift us, and sometimes it's perfectly okay because there's people wanting to help us.
I definitely think that it's a very complex thing, but a big part of it and a lot of the responsibility is on the institution, and institutions like CU Boulder for historically being exclusive and making sure people of color couldn't come. That's going to make people not want to come. I think at first, when you're kind of placed on a pedestal because of your identity, it can feel good to know that you're paving way for people to know that you can be in a place like this and achieve things. I think that if it's not followed up by change after that to make sure that people have that actual opportunity to achieve those things and without having to be perfect like I had to be in order to get to where I am today, and having to be exceptional, then I think that it just becomes very disheartening and very performative. From there, they place the burden on those that are impacted by these systemic issues that aren't in the same place as those of us that are made tokens, and then it just has this negative feedback loop.
I'm from an immigrant family, so I'm a second generation immigrant. My parents came from Taiwan. They were both the first in their family to go to college, and in my father's case, to graduate school. He was very proud of that. And like many other first generation immigrant families, they wanted their children to do one of 5 careers: doctor, engineer, maybe a dentist, lawyer, or sciences. Computer programmer was really big in the Bay Area when I was growing up. And I was totally uninterested in all of those fields. And so my going into journalism was considered rebellious.
I have heard from previous visitors, the road washes out sometimes, and passengers are compelled to continue groping or turn back. I am not afraid.
I think it's very much on the history of cinema, especially early silent cinema was hella racist. Of course, when you villainize a person, you're not just villainizing an individual, you're villainizing a whole group of people. It's a collective thing, especially for people of color, we're seen as a group. We're not individuals like white people, we're groups.
Within these communities where there are so many students of color, they're not told that they can do anything good. They're not told that they can achieve more. That's just a reality for a lot of people. I've seen it a lot with a lot of my classmates. And so I think that there needs to be more of an effort to, within these communities, an institutional effort to restructure and give support and access to these communities so that students of color from an early age know that they can go to anywhere that they want to go and they shouldn't have to feel like they're not going to belong, and they should know that they can succeed in whatever that they decide to do.
I think the connection between the access to media fields by a range of historically marginalized populations and the presence of structural racism are absolutely tied, because the media are what create our images of people in society, and the media have so much power. So if the people who are often misrepresented don't have access to media and are not being hired or promoted into management positions, whether it's because they're weeded out for not following a traditional path, or they're not part of the old boys or sometimes old girls network that exists among established white media professionals, then we lose that voice in media, and that population loses some advocacy or some power in how they're represented.
I am not afraid. I am not afraid of rough spots or lonely times. I don't fear the success of this endeavor. I am raw in a space not to be discovered, but invented.
Do you think that despite its troubling and racist history, film and documentary and media production can be revolutionary, and do you think it can help to change these problems that have been inherent within it and problems within the world?
I 100% think that if we wanted to, we really can change media, documentary production for the good. I know so many films that have they're mainly foreign, of course, that have really gone and talked about these issues and addressed these issues within the film itself, and are very self-reflective, about production, cinema, and documentaries, and of race and gender and classism, or of culture as well. I think that's the beauty about things. The context I've been talking about is usually American films and the overall film industry with colorism, racism, all of that within representation. But I think there's so many films out there that have already done this.
I think that ties into how it's an agent for storytelling and a way to tell stories, because I think especially within cultures of color, oral storytelling has been a dominant way of preserving culture and power, and passing on those legacies, and having social change is through storytelling and empowering ourselves through our voices. And so I think that film can have that potential that so many of these communities of color have had in the past and currently have, of using their voice as power and to create change. And so I think film is another way for that, to use the voice and the story of those impacted and those whose stories haven't been told, as a way for social change. And so I think that despite its racist past, if we change it from within, or create something new outside of the current institution that film and documentary is within, then it can have the potential for social change and to be revolutionary.
Yeah. And I guess I would say when we talk about grassroots media, there are so many different kinds. There's ones that are hyper-local. There's ones that are just one person who creates a channel or a blog or a TikTok kind of rant, a regular ranting session that kind of makes it into the mainstream. You could have the media that are in different languages, media that serve specific populations. And so I think the internet has really enabled a lot more voices to come in, and then made it really challenging for those voices to continue and make money, because it is harder and harder in media to make money. It's no longer just I could sell an ad to my local restaurant that caters to my population that reads my ethnic newspaper, because that model is fading in all forms of media. And I don't know what the answer is. I think we need it. We need people to continue diversifying the voices of media, but nobody has come up with a profit model that really works. And maybe that's why the current generation of media students, journalism students, need to start thinking creatively and being educated in more than just production, in the business of media, in how to come up with innovative models.
I promise you nothing. I accept your promise. Of the same we are simply riding, a wave that may carry or crash. It's a journey, and I want to go.